No one was prepared for Earth's deadly warship. I have lived 412 years. I have stood in rooms where the fate of entire star systems was decided in less time than it takes a sun to pulse. I have watched civilizations fall apart over a single misread treaty, and I have shaken hands, metaphorically speaking, as my species has no hands, with beings so ancient, they remember a time before our galaxy had a name. None of that prepared me for the morning the human ship appeared. It did not announce itself. It did not request permission to enter controlled space. It did not broadcast a registry code or follow any of the 17 standard approach protocols that every spacefaring civilization in the Concordat has agreed upon for the last 3,000 years. One moment the long-range sensors at Checkpoint Vora showed nothing but empty drift and the quiet hum of an asteroid field. The next moment, there it was, a single vessel, sitting in the middle of controlled space as if it had always been there, and we had simply failed to notice. Every alarm in Sector 9 fired at once. I was in my office reviewing trade summaries from the Pelin border when my aide, a young Dorothi named Quess, burst through the door without knocking. Quess never moved quickly. Dorothy physiology made rapid movement uncomfortable, and in 4 years of working together, I had never once seen him run. He was running now. His 3 pairs of eyes were all open at the same time, which in Dorothy body language means something close to what humans call panic. He did not say anything. He simply pointed at the wall display and activated the live sensor feed. I looked at the ship. My first thought was that it was a mistake. The sensor array at Checkpoint Vora was old, installed during the Pelin expansion, and not upgraded since. Equipment failures happened. Ghost readings happened. What did not happen was a ghost reading that showed up simultaneously on every long-range array in a 4-system radius, on Concordat military satellites, on civilian shipping beacons, and on the personal navigation unit of a cargo hauler named Dren, who was at that moment eating his lunch 300,000 kilometers from the object, and nearly dropped his meal when his ship's proximity alert screamed at him. It was not a mistake. The vessel was large, not the largest thing I had ever seen. The Concordat's flagship carrier, the Velith Prime, holds that title comfortably, but large in a way that felt wrong, the way a predator looks wrong when you see it somewhere it should not be. It was angular, where most advanced ships were smooth. Its hull was dark, a deep gray-black that absorbed sensor light rather than reflecting it, which was part of the reason it had been so hard to detect on approach. Whatever drive system had brought it here had left no plasma trail, no radiation signature, no gravitational echo. It had arrived as quietly as a thought, and its power output was doing something that should not have been possible. Our chief science officer on the station, a brilliant and deeply unflappable Thrennic named Oval, came to stand beside me in the monitoring room. She looked at the energy readings for a long time without speaking. Oval had a habit of going very still when she was processing something difficult. She went very still now. "That output figure," she said finally. "Is that correct?" The technician at the console checked the reading twice. "Confirmed," he said. "All arrays agree." Oval was quiet again. "That level of power generation," she said slowly, "would require, at minimum, a contained stellar fragment, a piece of an actual star, stabilized and channeled. No species in the Concordat has achieved that. We have theorized it. We have run models. We have never built it." She paused. "Our own projections suggested it would be another 400 years before anyone managed it." "How long have humans been spacefaring?" Quess asked from the corner. "Officially registered with the Concordat." I said, 61 years. No one in the room said anything for a moment. The ship had not moved. It had not fired. It had not done anything except exist in a place where it had no business existing, radiating enough energy to make our instruments deeply unhappy. On its hull, our visual sensors picked up markings, not the mathematical symbols that most spacefaring species use for identification, not the geometric patterns of Concordat registry codes. Something simpler, a circle, blue and green and white, suspended against the black of the hull like a small decorative thought. It took me a moment to recognize it. It was a planet, their planet, a picture of Earth, painted on the side of a warship, as casually as someone might hang a family portrait on a wall. I requested an open channel and identified myself using all 14 of my official titles, as protocol required. There was a pause of roughly 3 seconds, Then a voice came back. It belonged to a human woman. She sounded young. Humans are difficult to age by voice alone, but there was a quality of calm energy in her tone that suggested someone not very far into their adult years. She gave her name as Captain Lena Farrow, of the Earth Defense Vessel Ironhold. She did not list any titles. She did not offer a formal greeting. She spoke the Concordat's standard trade language with a slight accent that I later learned was characteristic of the eastern coastal regions of her home continent. What she said was, "Ambassador Varath-san, good. I was hoping to reach someone with authority. We understand that the Kethvor Dominion destroyed one of our colony settlements 4 months ago. 46,000 people. We're here to discuss accountability." Her voice was perfectly level, not angry, not threatening, the way a person sounds when they have already thought through every possible outcome of a conversation and are simply waiting to see which one will apply. I had been a diplomat for 400 years. I recognized the tone. It was the tone of someone who did not need to make threats because the situation itself was making them on their behalf. I told her I was aware of the colony incident. I told her that the Concordat was investigating. I told her that these things required time and process, and the careful application of interstellar law. She said, "I understand. We'll wait." And then the Ironhold simply sat there, in the middle of Concordat-controlled space, radiating the power output of a small star, and waited. I sent my first emergency message to the High Council within the hour. It read, in its entirety, "The humans have arrived. I do not think any of our assessments of them were correct. Please advise urgently." The Concordat's formal threat classification for Earth, at that time, was a Category 2, emerging civilization, no significant military capability, no projected relevance to galactic affairs for a minimum of 3 to 5 generations. Our analysts had watched Earth for decades through passive long-range observation. They had seen a world of fascinating and bewildering contradictions, a species that had nearly ended itself twice through industrial pollution, and once through a brief but alarming period of coordinated conflict, and had survived all three. A species that built hospitals, and also built weapons with startling creativity. A species that wrote music of extraordinary beauty, and then played it during wars. Our analysts had concluded, based on all available data, that humans were too busy with their own internal complications to pose any serious external concern. Looking at the Ironhold's energy signature, I thought about those analysts. I thought about their careful reports and their confident projections. Then I looked at Quess, who was staring at the sensor display with all 6 of his eyes fully open again, and I decided that whatever the High Council advised, I was going to spend the next several hours revising every assumption I had ever held about humanity. What none of us knew yet was that the Ironhold was not an exception. It was an introduction. The Kethvor Dominion did not respond well to the concept of accountability. This surprised no one. The Kethvor had been the Concordat's most powerful and most difficult member civilization for approximately 800 years. They were large, physically imposing, averaging nearly 3 meters in height, with a natural body armor of layered scale plating that made them nearly impervious to conventional weapons. Their homeworld had a gravity 1.4 times galactic standard and an atmosphere that most species found immediately lethal. They had evolved in an environment that did not forgive weakness, and they had carried that philosophy into their governance, their diplomacy, and their military strategy for as long as anyone could remember. Their military record was, by any reasonable measure, extraordinary. 40 undefeated engagements over 6 centuries, 12 full war fleets, each containing vessels that represented the peak of Concordat military engineering. Their flagship, the Kethvor Eternal, was considered the most feared single vessel in the known galaxy. They had not lost a direct military engagement since the Battle of Thresh, 620 years ago, and even that loss was disputed in certain academic circles. When word reached Kethvor Prime that a single human vessel had appeared in Concordat space, and was demanding accountability for the destruction of a human colony, the Dominion's High Command reviewed the situation for approximately 40 minutes. Then they dispatched 3 dreadnoughts, the Unbroken Will, the Voice of Dominion, and the Stone of Ages, to educate the humans about how the galaxy worked. 3 dreadnoughts was, by any conventional military logic, a considerable over-response to a single vessel. The Kethvor knew this. They were making a point. In their experience, overwhelming and obvious force had a way of simplifying negotiations considerably. They expected the human ship to see three of the most powerful vessels in the Concordat, approaching at combat speed, and immediately begin the process of standing down, apologizing for the disruption, and requesting whatever terms the Kethvor were willing to offer. I watched the approach on the monitoring station's main display. Alongside me were Oval, Quess, 6 members of the Concordat security detail, and 3 civilian station personnel who had wandered in because word had spread through the station quickly, and nobody wanted to be the person who missed whatever was about to happen. The 3 dreadnoughts dropped out of faster-than-light travel at a standard combat distance, close enough to be an unmistakable show of force, far enough to allow for tactical positioning. Their weapons arrays came online immediately. Anyone with a basic understanding of military protocol knew exactly what this meant. The Kethvor were not coming to talk. Captain Lena Farrow's voice came over the open channel, without any particular urgency. 3 ships, she said, and I could hear what sounded like quiet communication in the background. People talking in low professional tones. Dreadnought class, consistent with Kethvor military registry. A brief pause. Ambassador Verath Son, are you still on the channel? I am, I said. Good. You should probably record this. The Kethvor admiral, a veteran named Herrick Sol who had commanded the fleet that reduced the Pelin uprising to silence 30 years prior, did not bother with a formal hail. He opened a broadcast channel on the widest military frequency and issued a single statement in the Dominion's native language, which our systems translated automatically. Human vessel, you are in violation of 14 Concordat protocols. You will power down your systems, surrender command authority, and prepare for boarding. You have 30 seconds to comply. The open channel from the Ironhold was quiet for a moment. Then Captain Farrow said, still in that same unhurried tone, we don't recognize the authority of the Kethvor Dominion to make that demand. We are here under Concordat law, on Concordat territory, which the Kethvor Dominion also operates within. If Admiral Herrick Sol would like to discuss the matter of 46,000 people and 1 destroyed colony settlement, we are available for that conversation. Admiral Herrick Sol apparently did not want to have that conversation. What happened next took 11 minutes. I know this precisely because I checked the mission log afterward. 11 minutes and 14 seconds. From the moment the Kethvor opened fire to the moment all 3 of their dreadnoughts went dark. The first salvo from the 3 Kethvor vessels was, by any historical measure, enormous. The combined firepower of 3 dreadnoughts in simultaneous discharge represents a level of destructive output that, in previous engagements, had been sufficient to crack the crust of a mid-sized moon. Every weapon system they had came online at once. Particle lances, gravitational disruptors, mass drivers, plasma columns. The strike was designed to end things before they began. The Ironhold took it. Not moved, not destroyed. Took it. The sensors showed the energy wash spread across the human ship's hull, and then something remarkable happened. The hull read differently after the impact than it had before. The absorption signature changed. The Ironhold's own power output, already extraordinary, increased in the aftermath of the strike, not decreased. Oval made a sound I had never heard from a Threnic before, something between a gasp and a scientific observation. Their armor, she said. It's not passive. It's active. It's learning from each impact and restructuring to absorb the next one, more efficiently. She stared at her console. They built a ship that gets better at surviving the longer you fight it. The Kethvor fired again, and again. Each time, the Ironhold absorbed the strike. Each time, the human ship's readings shifted slightly, adapted slightly, as if the hull itself was thinking about what had just happened and deciding how to handle it better next time. Admiral Herrick Sol, to his credit, recognized something was wrong faster than many commanders would have. He began repositioning his ships, attempting to flank, to find an angle that the strange adaptive armor had not yet accounted for. It was tactically intelligent. It was also, by that point, insufficient. The Ironhold fired back for the first time 8 minutes into the engagement. 1 shot. A single focused beam of something that our sensors could not immediately classify. It was not any weapon type in the Concordat's registry. Not a particle lance, not a plasma column, not a gravitational disruptor. It hit the Unbroken Will directly in its primary propulsion array, not its weapons, not its crew compartments, its engines. The Unbroken Will went dark in that section instantly, still intact, crew unharmed. but unable to move or maneuver. The second shot, 12 seconds later, hit the Voice of Dominion's weapons array, offline, still intact, crew still fine. The third shot was the one that made Admiral Herrick Soul, as he later described it to me himself, understand that he had made a very serious mistake. The Stone of Ages was his flagship for this operation, and the Ironhold's targeting was so precise that it threaded a focused beam through the exact gap between the Stone of Ages' primary and secondary shield layers, a gap that existed for approximately half a second during a shield rotation cycle, and disabled the ship's command systems so completely that Admiral Herrick Soul could not even broadcast a formal surrender. He had to do it on a civilian communications frequency, using a backup unit designed for distress signals, which meant his surrender was received simultaneously by every shipping vessel, civilian station, and orbital platform within 2 light-years. The entire battle record, including sensor logs and communications, was automatically distributed through the Concordat's standard data relay system. It reached High Council chambers on Concordat Prime within the hour. It reached civilian news networks roughly 20 minutes after that. Within 48 hours, every spacefaring civilization in the galaxy had seen what one human ship did to 3 Keth-4 dreadnoughts in 11 minutes. What struck me most, reviewing the engagement logs afterward, was not the power of the weapons, or the resilience of the hull, or even the precision of the targeting, though all 3 of those things were genuinely astonishing. What struck me was the restraint. The Ironhold had never, at any point in the engagement, struck a crew compartment. Every disabled system, propulsion, weapons, communications, navigation, had been targeted with what I could only describe as deliberate care. 3 dreadnoughts, crews totaling over 14,000 Keth-4 personnel, and not a single casualty. Not one. I sat with that information for a long time. A civilization that is simply powerful destroys things. A civilization that is powerful and controlled chooses exactly how much damage to do and exactly where to do it. And that choice communicates something that raw power alone never can. The Ironhold had not merely defeated 3 dreadnoughts. It had sent a message with every single shot. And the message was, we know exactly how bad we could make this, and we chose not to. That was the moment I stopped thinking of humanity as a curiosity to be monitored, and began thinking of them as something the galaxy had genuinely never seen before. I sent a second message to the High Council. It read, the Keth-4 sent 3 dreadnoughts. The humans disabled all 3 in 11 minutes, with no casualties on either side. I am revising my assessment. Please revise yours. Urgently. I did not sleep that night. I do not think anyone on the station did. We sat with the sensor logs and the engagement records, and the image of Captain Lena Farrow's ship sitting exactly where it had been before the fight, unchanged, waiting. The small painted image of a blue-green planet on its hull catching the light of a nearby star. Nobody on the station said much. There was not a great deal to say. We had all just watched the galaxy change, and we were still trying to work out what that meant. What we did not know yet, what none of us knew yet, was that the engagement itself was only the beginning. The harder thing to understand was not what humans could do in a fight. The harder thing was what they chose to do when the fight was over. That understanding would take considerably longer to arrive, and when it did, it would unsettle us in an entirely different way than the battle had. Because any species can be dangerous. The galaxy has plenty of dangerous species. What the galaxy did not have, and what we were only beginning to understand we were looking at, was a species that was dangerous, and had decided, very deliberately, to be something else as well. I met Captain Lena Farrow in person 3 days after the engagement. The formal negotiation session had been arranged at Checkpoint Vora's diplomatic annex, a circular room with a long table, environmental controls set to approximate Concordat standard conditions, and windows that looked out over the docking array where the Ironhold sat in quiet orbit. She was younger than her voice had suggested, not very tall by human standards, with short dark hair, and the kind of composed expression that takes most species several decades of diplomatic training to develop. She wore the same plain gray uniform she had worn in every communication. No decorations, no rank insignia beyond a single small badge at her collar, no visible weapons. She was accompanied by 2 other humans, a lean older man named Lieutenant Commander Owen Hale, who was introduced as her tactical officer, and who spent most of the meeting quietly taking notes, and a younger woman named Dr. Petra Dowd, who was identified as the ship's senior science officer, and who looked at everything in the room with the focused attention of someone cataloging details for later use. They sat down without ceremony. Captain Farrow placed a data chip on the table. Not dramatically, just set it down, the way you might put your keys on a counter when you come home. She did not explain what it was immediately. She looked at me first. "Ambassador," she said, "I want to say something before we begin, and I want it on the record." "Of course," I said. "We are not here because we wanted to be. We are not here because Earth has any interest in galactic politics, or Concordat affairs, or the internal dynamics of the Kethvor Dominion. We had a settlement, 46,000 people, miners, farmers, engineers, families. They had been building something for 11 years. The Kethvor destroyed it because it was within what they considered a resource claim boundary, and they did not believe there would be any meaningful response to doing so." She paused. "They were wrong about that. The Concordat acknowledges the incident," I said carefully. "Good," she said. "Then let's talk about what comes next." The data chip, it turned out, contained a complete set of sensor logs from the Ironhold's reconnaissance systems, detailed scans of every Kethvor military installation within the relevant sector, including 3 that the Concordat's own intelligence services had not known existed. Captain Farrow slid it across the table to me, with the calm of someone sharing a recipe. "We have been watching this region for some time," she said, in response to my undisguised surprise. "We like to understand our neighborhood." I picked up the chip. Oval, seated beside me, was already reaching for it. "How long," I asked, "has Earth been conducting reconnaissance of Concordat space?" Captain Farrow considered the question briefly. "Long enough," she said. I thought about the Concordat's assessment of Earth. Category 2 threat, emerging civilization, no significant military capability, projected irrelevance for 3 to 5 generations. I thought about the analysts who had written those assessments. I thought about the fact that while we had been observing Earth from a comfortable distance, making confident notes about their limitations, they had apparently been quietly doing the same to us, and to everyone else in the region, and had done so without our knowledge, and had thought it completely unremarkable to mention it. "What do you want?" I asked, putting the chip down. She told me. It was a short list. The colony settlement would be replaced, fully funded by the Kethvor Dominion, at a location of Earth's choosing. The Kethvor would formally acknowledge, within Concordat legal frameworks, that the original colony was a lawful settlement and its destruction was unlawful. The Concordat would establish a clear protocol for the recognition and protection of human settlements in outer sectors, and Earth would be guaranteed freedom from interference in its colonization activities in a defined region of space. She did not ask for territory. She did not ask for political representation on the High Council. She did not ask for reparations beyond the replacement of what had been lost. She did not ask for any form of ongoing relationship with the Concordat beyond the formal recognition of an agreement. Lieutenant Commander Owen Hale looked up from his notes. "We're not asking for anything we haven't already established we're entitled to under Concordat law," he said quietly. It was the first time he had spoken. "We read your law documents, all of them, before we came." They had read the Concordat's law documents, all of them. The Concordat's legal archive contained more than 40,000 individual treaties, precedents and frameworks, accumulated over 3,000 years of interstellar governance. The complete archive, in standard text format, would take an average reader approximately 600 years to finish. I did not ask how they had managed this. I had the strong sense that the answer would only produce more questions. Dr. Petra Dowd, the science officer, had not said anything yet. She was looking out the window at the Ironhold. I followed her gaze. The ship sat in orbit with the same absolute stillness it had maintained since arriving, that same dark presence that absorbed more light than it reflected. "Your ship's armor," Oval said, unable to contain the question any longer. She had been holding it for 3 days. "The adaptive restructuring we observed during the engagement, is that a material property, or is there an active system managing it?" Dr. Dowd looked at her. She smiled. It was a warm, genuine smile that did not contain the slightest suggestion that she was going to answer the question. "That's a good question," she said. "I have several more," Oval said. "I'm sure," said Dr. Dowd, pleasantly. The formal negotiation took 4 days. The Kethvor representatives arrived on the second day, after considerable pressure from the High Council, and conducted themselves with the subdued manner of people who have recently had a very important realization. Admiral Herrick's soul was not among them. He had been recalled to Kethvor Prime, presumably to answer for the engagement, but the officials who came were senior enough to make binding commitments, and they made them. On the final afternoon, after the formal documents had been agreed, and the data chips signed and distributed, I walked with Captain Farrow to the observation deck, while the others finished the administrative work inside. We stood looking at the iron hold in its orbit. The blue-green circle on its hull was visible from here, catching the light differently than the surrounding hull. "I want to ask you something," I said. "Directly, if you don't mind." "Go ahead," she said. "How many ships like the iron hold does Earth have?" She was quiet for a moment. Out in the docking bay below us, a Concordat supply shuttle was making its approach, tiny against the dark bulk of the human vessel. Captain Farrow turned to look at me. She smiled. It was the warmest smile I had seen in a very long time, and it was also, without any effort on her part, the most unsettling expression I had witnessed in 400 years of diplomatic service. "Enough," she said. "We always build enough." She said it the same way someone might say that they always kept enough food in the house for unexpected guests. Practical, prepared, quietly certain that whatever came through the door, they would be ready for it. I nodded. I did not ask again. What followed over the next several months changed the shape of galactic politics more thoroughly than any single event since the founding of the Concordat itself. Not because of continued conflict. There was no further conflict. The iron hold never fired again. It remained in Sector 9 for another 30 days, while the formal agreements were processed and verified, then departed as quietly as it had arrived, leaving no more trace of its passage than a faint shift in the local sensor baseline that Oval spent several weeks puzzling over. But the knowledge that it had been there, and what it had done, spread through every civilization in the Concordat, with a speed and thoroughness that no diplomatic communique could have matched. The sensor logs from the engagement were public record. Anyone with access to the Concordat's data relay system could watch those 11 minutes as many times as they wished, from as many angles as the recording array had captured. Many people watched it many times. 7 civilizations that had been quietly preparing exploratory operations into outer sectors, where human colonies were being established, quietly canceled those operations. No announcements were made. No formal communications were sent. The plans simply stopped appearing in the diplomatic intelligence reports that cross my desk each morning, the way a shadow disappears when someone turns on a light. I noted each cancellation and said nothing publicly, but I filed every one of them carefully. Earth, for its part, sent a trade delegation to Concordat Prime 2 months after the Ironhold's departure. The delegation was led by a cheerful man named Commissioner Paul Wren, who had gray hair, comfortable clothes, and the energetic manner of someone who genuinely enjoyed meeting new people. He brought gifts, actual physical gifts, which is not a diplomatic tradition in the Concordat, but which was clearly an important one to humans. He brought food, which turned out to be extraordinary, in ways that occupied Concordat culinary researchers for months afterward. He brought music recordings. He brought detailed proposals for cooperative research projects in fields ranging from materials science to atmospheric engineering to medical technology. He did not bring any weapons. He did not mention the Ironhold. He did not make any reference to the engagement in Sector 9. He behaved, throughout his time on Concordat Prime, as if he was simply very pleased to be there and hoped everyone was going to get along well. The High Council was not entirely sure what to do with him, but they found, somewhat to their surprise, that they liked him. The Concordat formally offered Earth a permanent seat on the High Council, 6 months after the Ironhold's departure. The offer was extended with considerable ceremony, full diplomatic delegation, formal announcement, the kind of attention that most civilizations spend centuries trying to earn. Joining the High Council represents not just political representation, but recognition of a civilization's standing in galactic affairs, and the Council had not extended a new invitation in over 100 years. Earth declined. Commissioner Paul Wren delivered the response himself, in a meeting that I was present for, and that I have thought about many times since. He was as cheerful as he always was, dressed in the same comfortable style, carrying a small container of a hot beverage that humans consume in enormous quantities, and that he had taken to distributing freely to everyone he encountered. having discovered that a surprising number of concordat species found it pleasant. He set the beverage on the table, folded his hands, and said, "We're genuinely grateful for the invitation. I want you to know that. It means something to us, but we're going to respectfully decline." "May I ask why?" High Counselor Vrethon said. Vrethon was the senior member of the council at that time, nearly 700 years old, and not known for patience with unexpected answers. "Because the work that needs doing isn't here," Commissioner Wren said pleasantly. "The work that needs doing is out there." He gestured vaguely upward, in the direction of the ceiling, which was presumably meant to indicate space generally. "We've got about 14 active colony programs, a deep space research initiative we've been running for the past 30 years, 3 first contact protocols currently in preliminary stages, with civilizations you haven't made contact with yet, and a medical mission that's been operating in the Varathi outbreak zone for the past 7 months that we'd like to keep properly funded." He smiled. "Sitting in council chambers is important work, and we respect the people who do it. It's just not our work." "What is your work?" Vrethon asked. "Going further," Commissioner Wren said. "Understanding more. Building things. Meeting people." He picked up his beverage. "Helping, where we can. We're quite good at that, actually, when people let us." This turned out to be an understatement so large it occupied Concordat analysts for years. Within the following 18 months, Earth's medical teams, apparently extensive, organized, and extraordinarily well-equipped, had worked in 4 outbreak zones that the Concordat's own health institutions had been managing with limited success. They did not ask for resources beyond what they brought with them. They did not ask for credit, or political recognition, or favors. They came, they worked, they left, and the outbreak rates in all 4 zones declined significantly in the months that followed. Earth's engineering teams appeared in 2 locations where major infrastructure projects had stalled. A deep-water atmospheric processor on a Pellan colony world that had been not working correctly for 6 years was repaired in 11 days by a human engineering team of 8 people. A communications relay network in the outer Thresh systems that the Concordat had been trying to rebuild since a solar event destroyed it was re-established by a human team that had apparently been studying the problem unofficially for some time, and arrived with very specific solutions already prepared. None of these things came with conditions. No treaties were requested in exchange. No political leverage was applied. When Concordat officials asked what Earth wanted in return, the answer was invariably some version of, "Nothing in particular," or, "Just to be useful," or, in one memorable case, a junior human engineer named Claire Abbott, responding to the question, with visible confusion, and saying, "We fixed a broken thing. That's just what you do with broken things." I interviewed Claire Abbott afterward. She had been working on the communications relay project for 4 months and was preparing to return home. She was 28 years old, had degrees in 3 different engineering disciplines, and found the question of why she had helped deeply puzzling, in the way that people find puzzling a question they have never had reason to ask themselves before. "We teach children this," she said. "From the very beginning. If you can help and you don't, that says something about who you are, and we'd rather it says something good." I asked her if she was worried, given what the Ironhold had demonstrated, that other civilizations might see humanity as a threat. She thought about this for a moment. "People are usually afraid of things they don't understand," she said. "The best way to not be misunderstood is to be clearly understood. So we try to be clear." She paused. "The Ironhold was clear. This is clear too. They're the same message, just in different languages." I thought about that for a long time after she left. The Kethvor situation resolved through formal Concordat arbitration, which resulted in the colony replacement being funded and completed within the year. The Kethvor Dominion did not behave badly during this process, which surprised several observers. When I asked a Kethvor official quietly, during a break in proceedings, what had led to their cooperative attitude, he was quiet for a moment, and then said, "We reviewed the engagement logs carefully, many times." He paused. "The human ship could have destroyed ours. It did not. We understood that this was a choice. We found it more informative than the destruction would have been." He went home and recommended to his high command that the Dominion establish formal trade relations with Earth as quickly as possible. That recommendation was adopted within the month. 17 other civilizations made similar moves in the following year, Earth's trade connections in the galaxy expanded faster than the Concordat's data models had predicted was possible in that time frame, and when our economists attempted to understand why, the explanation that came back was frustratingly simple. Earth was reliable. When they made an agreement, they kept it. When they said they would do something, they did it. When something went wrong, they fixed it without being asked and without making it someone else's problem. This sounds, when stated plainly, like the minimum standard of civilized behavior. It is, in theory, what every civilization in the Concordat aspires to. The unfortunate reality is that in practice, interstellar agreements involve so many competing interests, so many opportunities for reinterpretation and renegotiation, and quiet maneuvering, that straightforward reliability is considerably rarer than it should be. Earth apparently had not gotten the message that reliability was supposed to be complicated. Commissioner Paul Wren returned to Concordat Prime regularly over the following years, always with the same comfortable manner, always with the same gifts of food and music and good humor. He became, genuinely, one of the most well-liked figures in the diplomatic community, not because he represented power, though everyone knew the power was there, but because he was interested in people, in a way that felt entirely sincere. He remembered names. He asked about families. He learned fragments of dozens of different languages and used them imperfectly but cheerfully, in a way that most species found charming rather than offensive. He was, I came to understand, entirely representative of what humanity had decided to be in the galaxy. Not the Ironhold and not Claire Abbott as separate things, but both, at once, always, the same species and different expressions of the same core character. They had decided, it seemed to me, watching them over those years, that they were going to be genuinely themselves, completely and without apology, strong enough that no one could force them to be otherwise, and warm enough that most people stopped wanting to. I have been writing this account for 3 months. I have been trying, in that time, to find the right way to end it, to find the sentence, or the observation, that captures what I most want to say about humanity. I have drafted several endings and discarded all of them. They all felt insufficient. They all tried to make humanity into something neat and classifiable, when the entire point of humanity is that it resists that. Let me try, instead, to simply describe what I have seen. I have seen the Ironhold's engagement logs reviewed in every military academy in the Concordat, analyzed frame by frame, discussed in terms of tactics and technology, and the nature of power. I have seen the ship itself, still out there somewhere in human space, reported occasionally by long-range sensors at various coordinates, never staying in one place for very long, never making itself publicly known, unless there is a reason to. It fired once more after Sector 9. I should tell you about that. 8 months after the formal agreements were signed, a Concordat member world called Doratha Minor, Quess's home planet actually, which made this personally significant to me in a way that several other crises had not been, experienced a humanitarian emergency when a critical water processing failure, combined with an unusual atmospheric event, created conditions that threatened roughly half the planet's agricultural output. The Concordat's emergency response systems were engaged, but they were slow. The bureaucratic process of allocating emergency resources across member worlds is not built for speed. It is built for fairness, which is a different and sometimes more time-consuming thing. The Ironhold arrived at Doratha Minor 9 days after the crisis began. It had not been invited. It had not been formally requested. It had simply appeared. Again, without warning, without fanfare. And this time it was not alone. It had brought 12 other human vessels, none of them warships, all of them converted for cargo and carrying atmospheric processing equipment that the humans had apparently developed for their own colony worlds in challenging environments. The Ironhold fired twice during the Doratha Minor operation. Both times it fired into the upper atmosphere, in carefully calculated bursts, using its weapon systems, not as weapons at all, but as a precise atmospheric heating tool to break up the unusual weather pattern that was compounding the crisis. The targeting precision required for this was, according to every atmospheric scientist who reviewed it afterward, essentially impossible by any known standard. The Concordat emergency resources arrived 11 days later. By that point, the atmospheric crisis had been resolved. The human equipment was already installed and operational. The worst of the agricultural damage had been contained. The humans were packing up their tools and preparing to leave. No one had asked them to come. They came because they were nearby, and they knew about the problem, and they could help. Quest told me, after speaking with family members on Dorothy Minor, that the human engineers had spent their evenings during the operation, sitting with local families, learning words in the Dorothy language, sharing food, playing a game involving small colored pieces that Dorothy children apparently took to with great enthusiasm. They had not waited to be welcomed. They had simply been present in a way that made welcome feel natural. I am 70 years older than I was when the Ironhold first appeared. That is not a long time in my species' lifespan, but it has been long enough to watch the galaxy change around humanity in ways that I am still processing. The threat level classification for Earth in the Concordat's formal registry has been revised 11 times. I was involved in most of those revisions. Each time, we sit around a table and try to find the right category for them, and each time, we find that the categories do not quite fit. Every framework we have for understanding civilizations was built around the assumption that a sufficiently powerful civilization wants something: territory, dominance, resources, recognition, and that understanding what they want tells you how to predict them and position yourself in relation to them. Earth wants to go further, to understand more, to build things and fix broken things and meet new people and, when necessary, to demonstrate with complete clarity and zero cruelty that you cannot stop them from doing any of those things. We do not have a classification for that. There is a young Dorothy researcher in my office now, not Quess, who retired some years ago, but his niece, Yessa, who has the same habit of going very still when she is thinking hard, and the same unnerving ability to have all 6 of her eyes open simultaneously when something surprises her. She is working on what she calls a comprehensive analysis of human behavior patterns and galactic integration outcomes. She has been working on it for 2 years. She tells me it is not close to finished. I asked her recently what her main conclusion was. So far, she thought for a long time. They are not trying to be what we expected, she said finally. They are not trying to be frightening, and they are not trying to be friendly. They are simply trying to be themselves, very thoroughly. And it turns out that being fully yourself is more complicated and more affecting than anything you can plan to be. She went back to her research. On the docking registry for Checkpoint Vora, where I still work, there is now a permanent entry for Earth-registered vessels. There have been 214 distinct human ships logged through this checkpoint in the years since the Ironhold first arrived. They carry everything from engineering equipment to medical supplies to musical instruments to, on one memorable occasion, a small collection of living plants from Earth's surface, being transported to a Pellin research station where a botanist had requested them for a study. The human captain who delivered them had stayed an extra day to help the botanist understand how to care for them properly. The Ironhold itself has not passed through this checkpoint again, but I think about it often. That ship exists somewhere in the galaxy, dark-hulled, quietly extraordinary, carrying its painted image of a small blue-green world, and the fact of its existence means something that goes beyond military calculation. It means that somewhere out there, a species that has survived everything its own history could throw at it, has decided to take that survival and turn it into something that it goes out into the stars and uses on behalf of others. The warship sits in whatever orbit it currently occupies. It does not need to fire again. It has not needed to, since Dorothy Minor, and the Dorothy crisis required no combat. The galaxy remembers what it can do. That memory does a great deal of work quietly, in the background, in every negotiation and every border discussion, and every moment when a civilization considers whether it might be interesting to cause problems in human-adjacent space, and then decides that it is probably not interesting enough. But the memory of the Ironhold is not, when I am honest with myself, what matters most to me now. What matters most is Claire Abbott fixing a broken communications relay because it was a broken thing, and broken things should be fixed. Commissioner Paul Wren, distributing hot beverages, and remembering the names of junior Concordat officials who were not important enough for a diplomat to bother with. Human engineers sitting on the ground in the evening on Dorothy Minor, learning words in a language they would probably never use again, playing a game with children who would remember them for the rest of their lives. The galaxy has plenty of things to be afraid of. It has ancient weapons and collapsing stars, and civilizations that have been nursing grievances for centuries. It has complexity and instability and the ever-present possibility that something will go wrong in a way that cannot be undone. What it did not have, and what it has now, is humanity, a species that carries everything it has ever survived in the structure of how it builds things, and how it loves things, and how it goes about the work of being alive in the universe. A species that will come when you do not call for them and fix what you could not fix, and leave before you have properly thanked them. I do not have a category for them. I stopped looking for one. I simply watch the long-range sensors, the way I have every morning since that first impossible arrival, and when the iron hold's faint signature appears somewhere in the data, brief, unmistakable, passing through some far sector on its way to wherever it is going next, I note it in my log, and feel something that takes me a moment to identify. It feels like reassurance. It feels, I think, like knowing that somewhere out there in the dark, and the distance, and the extraordinary complication of everything that the galaxy is, something is moving that is genuinely on the side of what is good. Not because it has been appointed to be, or because it gains something from it, or because it has been forced into that position by treaty, or agreement, or political necessity, but because that is, very simply, and very thoroughly, what they are. The galaxy was not prepared for Earth's warship. That much was true, and that much will remain in the history files for as long as the Concordat keeps records. But the warship, in the end, is not the story. The story is everything that came after it, and everything that continues to come, quiet and determined and warmly, stubbornly human, out into the dark.